Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to do kind of a slow rolling start here. I know everybody's busy and has things to do. We want to make sure we give everybody time to join us here for this talk. I'm so excited to be doing this today. It's something that's been on my mind for a while, so I sincerely hope it's useful for you guys too. I know that the slides in the presentation, the materials are very often made available after the fact. So keep an eye on your email inboxes when we're done here. And if you need any of these things, feel free to reach out to the office and they'll get them sent over to you. And you should also have a chat box or a Q&A section off to the side. Feel free to put any questions you have in there. Don't be shy. I'm excited to hear what kind of questions everybody has. So without further ado, let's get going. Are my implants making me sick? So I would say the biggest question that I see all the time is breast implant illness real? And I can tell you from direct personal experience that even as little as 5 years ago, if you went looking online for something like this, it just wasn't really there. And if you typed in something like, are my implants making me sick, you would end up with a whole host of websites, mostly from plastic surgeons' offices and medical associations saying, nope, definitely can't happen. But that tide is changing. And so to kind of understand it, I think it helps to go back and look at the history of these things a little bit. And so implants have been around since the early 1960s, and they've been consistently kind of reevaluated and updated and changed over the years since. And so we've got kind of a history of, oops, that one was a problem. Let's see if we can make it a little bit better. The original implants were a silicone liquid, and they were completely removed from the market, banned in 1992 because they would leak. And then women would have this free-floating silicone everywhere in the body, creating all kinds of havoc. And they couldn't remove it. It was a major problem. I remember when I was in medical school in our environmental medicine class, that was what it was focused on, was if they leak, you've got a major problem on your hands. And so they were taken off the market, but saline implants were still deemed completely fine. There are an awful lot of women who've got saline out there. And then in 2006, we got the gummy bear implants, or the textured implants. The textured ones were meant to sort of stay in place better because it gave the body something to kind of grab onto. And the gummy bear implants had these very, very inspiring videos, because I know for me personally, as I was researching implants, I was like, well, we can't risk any kind of a rupture. The gummy bear ones, they'll cut them in half and say, look, even if you cut these in half, the goo, the gel doesn't go anywhere. It stays put. It's very like, woohoo, we're good. Let's do this. And so they're back on the market. Even today, millions and millions of implants are placed every year. But we're seeing more and more reports of people who are saying, my implants made me sick. And even to the point where celebrities are coming out with this. And so here is a small list of people who've had their implants removed, some with lots of publicity. I know Danica Patrick was kind of all over the internet for a little while talking about it. Some people less so. There are more, but I didn't want to spend too many slides on this one. So feel free to hop on the internet and see who's had their implants taken out. But the reason this is so near and dear to my heart is that it happened to me. And so I did a ton of research, typical scenario, mommy makeover. And I spent so much time looking at the safety of these things and thinking, how do I minimize risk of rupture, all of this, and everything that I found said they're safe. They've been studied 6 ways from Sunday. You're good to go. And I can tell you that over time, they made me so ill, so ill. And it was something that crept in slowly over the years. I didn't even really realize it was happening at once. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I thought, well, I'm tired, I'm brain foggy, I'm moody, I don't feel quite as happy, I don't feel quite as patient. But I've got small kids and I work a lot and life is stressful. And I mean, we can all make lots of excuses for why those things are happening. And Over the years, over the 5 years that I had implants in, I gained 40 pounds, despite not really changing anything with diet, exercise, and like, I work in this field. I tried all of the things and nothing worked. Or if it did work, it worked for an extremely short period of time, and then just gained it all back. Over the years, the symptoms got worse. So initially it was fatigue, brain fog, mood stuff, weight gain, things I could attribute to other things. And then eventually it was hair loss and headaches, muscle and joint pain, weird skin rashes. My estrogen started to tank, and I thought, am I doing early menopause? Like, that's surprising. My thyroid got out of whack. I had to take higher and higher doses of medication. I had terrible reflexes. I got really, really clumsy, terrible recovery. When I did work out, I would be sore and just in pain for days and days afterward. And then, the hair loss started, and then COVID hit, and I got COVID, and it was like throwing fuel on a fire. After that, I was having palpitations, dizziness. I'd be in with a patient doing a history, typing away, thinking, gosh, I hope I don't fall out of my chair. I can hardly see what I'm doing right now. It was intense. We know now that if you're going to have a reaction to these things, it's very kind of autoimmune in nature. And specifically COVID also tends to trigger or flare autoimmune stuff. And so that was kind of a double whammy at the time. And I ran, over these years, I ran every test under the sun, and they all came back perfectly fine, perfectly normal. I mean, you all know the story. You'd go in with your normal labs and say, why do I feel terrible? And it's like, well, there's no reason for you to feel terrible. And so I stumbled on breast implants. Actually, a patient brought it in. She said, hey, I'm going to have my implants removed and I need help with detox. Can you help me with that? And I said, well, yes, but I don't know a lot about this. And she said, well, here's this seminar happening, and passed me a flyer. And so I said, great, I'll learn everything I can learn. And as I sat in that seminar, I thought, OMG, this is what it is. And armed with the right search terms, things like breast implant illness, I found so many more resources online, stories from other women who'd been through similar things. So it's gaining an awful lot of traction out there. And let's see, so that brings us to these pictures, and I'll give all the credit to my husband because I would never have thought to put these things together. But this picture on the left here, before I started any kind of HRT with pellets, and also before implants, we were out water skiing that day, and a friend of mine just happened to snap the picture. That's fine. After 4 or 5 years of both implants and pellets, because those two things happened at the same time for me, you can see this 40 pounds worth of weight gain. It was not comfortable. I felt miserable. I was tired. It was rough times, really rough times. 2 years post-explant, it was amazing. I woke up from surgery feeling like a brand new woman. And, you're supposed to take it easy after a surgery like that. And I just couldn't. I could not sit still. I felt so good. I had so much energy. A family friend of ours came over, and it struck me so much. He said, you seem happy again. And I was like, man, I didn't realize it had gotten that bad, when the people around you notice that you're just not happy. And I told him, I said, knowing how I feel now, there's not a sum of money you could pay me to put these things back in. Like, heaven forbid, if I were to get breast cancer and have to do mastectomy, I would just go flat. And he's like, no, there's a number. There's always a number. Somebody could pay you some ridiculous sum and you'd put them back in. I said, no, like, even if I was lounging on my mega yacht in the Mediterranean, if I felt like I was dying every night, it wouldn't be worth it. And so the weight quite literally fell off. After I had the surgery, I think I lost 10 pounds the first week. And even people were like, wow, you look so much leaner, even though it wasn't a huge change. Because I work in the healthcare space, I track all kinds of different random metrics. And one day on a whim, about a week post-op, I decided to recheck my measurements, and I had lost an inch out of my neck, which is just the weirdest thing. So that was fluid retention. I mean, these bags kind of sit here and they impede lymphatic flow, blood circulation. My hands used to turn ice cold, tingly, no blood flow. That all cleared up as soon as the implants came out. Everything could circulate again. And then this other picture here on the right, this is just my plug. Ladies, if you are not weightlifting, you got to add it in. It was absolutely a game changer for me physique wise. But the other reason I added this is this little picture here with this awesome little baby vein running across my shoulder. I was so excited when I saw that in the gym. It doesn't show up every day, only when I'm working out. But I was like, woo, I have a baby vein. That could never have happened with the implants on board because everything was just so swollen and puffy. So there was that. And let's see, we've got, yep. So a lot of these questions, and I will get to some of those. Those are some great questions. We'll get to those in a second. So these are some of the most common symptoms of breast implant illness: anxiety, fatigue, joint and muscle pain, trouble sleeping. My sleep was terrible. Trouble concentrating, temperature intolerance, recurrent infections. It impacts your ability to fight infection. Low libido, depression, hair loss, sharp pains in the breast that can happen, or they can sometimes get itchy, chronic fatigue, autoimmune stuff. I mean, irritable bowel. There are stories online of women who have both gained tremendous amounts of weight or who have lost tremendous amounts of weight. They lose muscle. They end up looking really undernourished. So this is kind of a typical list. I can tell you there are others. Everyone's story is pretty unique. And so the hard part with this is that symptoms can start right away. I've heard stories of women who knew within a week of having them placed that there was going to be a problem, or it can take years to start. And it can start all at once in a rush, or it can kind of slowly develop over time. So there's no timeline on this. Women can say, oh, I was fine for the first 10 years or 15 years, and now suddenly I'm having a problem. Or, some women say, I woke up and knew that it was a bad idea. Everyone's symptoms are different. Everyone's timeline is different, and everyone's recovery is different. So, once you have them removed, like for me, immediately I felt so much better. And then over the course of about 6 months, everything was kind of right back to baseline. For other women, it can take years. And so the estimate is that it takes roughly 1 to 2 months of healing and recovery for every year that you've had them placed. So if you've had implants for a good 25, 30 years, it might be a little bit of a journey to get you back to baseline. And so here are some pictures that are just available out on the web of other women who have posted their stories. And so you can see on the left here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but the redness, the puffiness, the blotchiness, all of that cleared up. You can see even some of these fine lines and wrinkles seem to have smoothed out. A lot of women say that the whites of their eyes get brighter. Now there's shadowing here, but you can see how they're kind of darker, right? They're kind of, she's got some blood vessels. They're not the bright white that we expect to see, but down here they are. And then the hair loss, you can see how much it grew in here at the temples, just really remarkable. This woman, much younger, 10 days post-op, and her face rash is reduced almost by half. Now, she might have some scarring. It might take a little while for that acne to go away, but you can see the redness, the swelling. A lot of these lesions have already cleared up. Really just amazing. You'll see if you look at enough of these before and afters, not only the difference in the whites of the eyes. In fact, you can see here it's a little bit more almost blue-gray, whereas here it's a little bit more white. But also sometimes the shape of a person's nose changes. You can see the bridge of her nose here is much more narrow because her face is not so puffy and swollen. This woman, 63 pounds she gained with her implants and ended up taking it all off. It took her a good 1.5 years to get back to baseline, but wow, what a change in her face. And again, actually, you can see the whites of her eyes too, how much brighter they got. And then this one, she's a blogger, so she actually posted a whole series on her journey with breast implant illness and the different symptoms that she had. And because of that, she ended up taking these before and after photos wearing the same bathing suit, kind of similar poses. And you can see just the dramatic shift in terms of how much weight she gained versus how much she lost. And I mean, this is somebody who her whole job is to be fit, right? I mean, you can imagine how frustrating that was for her. But even the changes in her face are really remarkable as well. And this woman, so definitely the creases have smoothed out. You can see her skin tone much more even, much more healthy. The rash went away really very quickly. And this woman, you can see exactly where her hair started growing back in after explant. There are an awful lot of these pictures where people have like a very clear mark where their hair is growing back in. This one, I think, was pretty amazing. This woman was diagnosed with MS. And so when you get diagnosed with MS, they actually see lesions on the brain. And so she had an awful lot of lesions, like a pretty severe case of MS based on her MRI. She went and had her implants removed and then went and had a repeat MRI after a period of time, and her lesions were just gone. And so, you know, that's not a guarantee. It's not like everyone who has MS can have their implants removed, but in her case, that's exactly what happened. So there are plenty of reports like these out there. So what causes this? Whether we like to think about it or not, and this picture is kind of grotesque as stickiness, but all of these different elements, metals, solvents, these are all things that get used in the manufacturing process, and all elements that are left behind in the implant, or not just left behind, they're actually part of what makes the implant itself. So there's plastic in the shell that holds it all together, all of these different ingredients plus the silicone. And there's a lot of research on these individual elements for disrupting immune function, disrupting hormones, causing weight gain, cancer, you know, those kinds of things. So they've also told us that these things can't be ruptured, right? You can see that remember that video I mentioned where they cut an implant in half and everything stayed put? Well, turns out that's false. They can rupture. This was meant to be a gummy bear implant, and you can see the casing got destroyed and all the goo kind of came out. When implants get placed, the body forms a capsule around it, and that's what you're seeing here. This is the tissue that the person's body built around the implant. They pulled the capsule off this one and it was fine. When they pulled the capsule off this one, it was ruptured. And same thing here. This one turned into a great big pile of mush, even though it wasn't supposed to. Now I can tell you, actually, we'll go back to that. When mine were removed, they were in pristine condition. No leaks, no problems. I had no problem with the surgery itself. I didn't have any capsular contracture. They were textbook. I mean, they were gorgeous. I loved them, but they didn't love me back. So you don't necessarily have to have a rupture in order to have symptoms and illness associated with this. Saline does not get a free pass. So the shell that holds the saline in place is plastic, and it has a lot of those same solvents and chemical compounds inside the shell. And saline is also notorious for developing mold, something that you can't see on imaging. And so this one was extremely moldy. And these implants came out of this woman here. And so her name is Melissa Lima. You can look her up online. She is the wife of a former Major League Baseball player. And so she got her implants in 2002 and didn't develop symptoms until 2010. She got extremely sick. I mean, you can see a dramatic change in her face. I mean, she doesn't even look like the same person. It took her quite a while to figure out what was going on. Lots of doctors, lots of different treatments and things. Within hours, she looked like a completely different person from having her implants removed. You can see she's still all bandaged up here. And so after a couple of years, her face changed even more. I just didn't have room to put those pictures on this slide. But if you feel like looking her up, the pictures are pretty remarkable, what she looks like now versus this woman who was just suffering so much. The textured implants we mentioned, words that were meant to stay in place better, those have been recalled for dramatically increasing your risk of this very rare type of blood cancer, BIALCL, breast implant associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma. It's a mouthful, but the word you need to remember there is lymphoma. Nobody wants that. We wouldn't wish a blood cancer on anyone. Like I said, they have been recalled, but there's no mandate for the doctors to notify patients. So there are an awful lot of women who have these implants that really have no idea that their risk is elevated. When you had them placed, they should have given you a card so you can look at that card and see which kind you've got if you're curious about that. Or you might be able to call the office that placed them and see if they have that information still on file. So how do you know if you have breast implant illness? And one of the questions here is, how can you tell if they're leaking? And so the best way to know if your implants are leaking is to get an MRI. And plastic surgeons will recommend that you get an MRI about every 5 years or so to check your implants, but we forget about that kind of thing. And so insurance won't cover that. And a breast MRI runs somewhere in that $250 to $300 range. You don't need contrast for it. It's not a terribly comfortable thing to do. You have to lay with your arms overhead and let your breasts kind of hang down, and then they image them, I guess. So if there's a leak, they'll see it there, and they can tell you whether it has spread outside the capsule or whether it is contained in the capsule. I have seen cases where women had leaks and the silicone actually migrated into their lymph nodes in their armpits and further impeded circulation. Apart from checking for leaks, there's really no way to test for this, which is a hard answer to give. And trust me, I looked when I was running every test under the sun. I thought, if there's a test out there to say, yes, you should do this, I'm going to run it. You can do a test for silicone hypersensitivity. It's similar to like a food allergy test. They'll test if you have an allergy to silicone. But that can be negative and you still have an issue. So I don't know that it's really worth running those hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of specialty exotic tests when they don't really give you a definitive answer. So for what that's worth, hopefully as more information comes out, as more women come forward, maybe some research will be done and maybe we'll have a test at some point in the future. But at this point, the only test is to remove your implants and see how you feel. Now, the hard part is we all get implants for a reason, right? They're fun, they're pretty. We want to look a certain way. I don't really have anything to say to that. All I can say is test for everything else. When I have women come in and they're ill, I mention, hey, this could be a possibility. Let's fix everything else we can find. And if you're still having issues, let's circle back to this, right? If they really want to keep their implants. Knowing how I feel now versus how I felt before, if women are open to it, I think across the board, just remove them, especially with all of those chemicals that are involved, the risk of rupture. For me personally, I thought, even if removing them doesn't change a thing, I don't want to have this thought in the back of my mind all the time. What if it is the implants? What if this is the year they rupture? So I think it's worth it just to have them out. Besides, small boobs are in now. So how to treat breast implant illness? First and biggest is to remove them. If you don't remove them, you're just going to be swimming uphill without a paddle. And then once they're out, as soon as you're able, exercise. It's that circulation getting the blood moving that allows the body to do what it already knows how to do. And so that circulation piece really is key. And then as your body eliminates, things come out through the urine, the stool, your sweat. And so if you're pooping regularly, if you're drinking plenty of water, that's going to handle the bulk of it. Beyond that, because everyone's experience is different, the degree of, whether there was a rupture, how severe were your symptoms, did you just feel autoimmune or did you have a fully diagnosed condition? You're going to want to work with your doc to personalize a plan to get you support in the right areas. Just to say the word detox doesn't really mean a lot. Are we talking kidneys? Are we talking liver? Are we talking skin? Are we talking lymphatics? So you're going to want to have your physician on board with that. And you might need some extra mitochondrial support. If your energy systems aren't working, then your cells aren't going to be able to do the things that they know how to do. So if you're thinking about removal, you're really going to want to get a surgeon who is well-versed in what's called an en-bloc total capsulectomy explant. And so what that means is when they go in, they're going to cut out the capsule and the implant in one piece and remove it whole. And the reason for that is, number one, the capsule itself can have residues of those chemicals and maybe some silicone gel bleed where like the implant gets sticky on the outside in that capsule, and your body has walled it off to protect you from it. And so you'll want to remove all of those pieces if you want to remove all residues of those chemicals. There's some debate online about whether the en-bloc capsulectomy is necessary or not. It costs a lot more because you have to be fully knocked out. I know when I talked to my plastic surgeon about having them removed, he said, oh yeah, this inpatient come in, we'll numb you up, just make a cut and pop them right out. Easy peasy, in and out, 30 minutes, no anesthesia needed. But that would have left the capsule behind. And there are an awful lot of case reports of women out there who left the capsule behind and ultimately had to go back in and have that capsule removed. For me personally, again, I didn't want any lingering thoughts in the back of my mind. Is that capsule still in there causing problems? So for me, it was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it once. So remove it that way. The other benefit to doing en-bloc capsulectomy, not just in removing that capsule, is if your implant is ruptured, imaging is not perfect. So I tore my ACL a couple of years ago, had an MRI. They said it was only a partial tear. It was not partial. That ligament was completely blown. Imaging can make mistakes. Radiologists can make a mistake. And so if they get in there and that implant is ruptured and they cut into that capsule, now that goo is leaking into your chest cavity. And for a surgeon to try and clean that up is extraordinarily difficult. So you want to keep that as contained as humanly possible as they're removing it. So those are the words you need: en-bloc total capsulectomy. There are a couple of docs in the Valley that really specialize in this. And if you go online to some of the different forums and breast implant illness support groups, they'll have entire lists for you. Some of them specialize in doing lifts at the same time if you want to kind of perk things up while you're under. I did mine with a Dr. John Rowley. He's based out of Ahwatukee. He's a very kind man, did great work. I was very happy with my experience there. Here are some other resources for you. So healingbreastimplantillness.com is a great website with lots of information on it. If you just Google breast implant illness now, a lot of stuff's going to pop up. It's so much more than when I was looking, I guess it's 8 years ago now. Back then it was, no, this isn't a thing. And now there are plenty of health organizations, plastic surgeons' offices saying, yes, this is a thing. So there's a lot to be found out there. There's a great TED Talk by Laura Miles, getting into the science behind this. What is the immune reaction that happens? What components of the implant are we reacting to? It goes into much more depth than we have time for here today. So if you want to really kind of geek out on that stuff, I highly recommend that TED Talk. There is a documentary on Prime called Explant. that's worth a watch. And then there are a ton of different Facebook groups. And so the plastic surgeon that I used was Dr. John Rowley. In fact, here, I think I can type his name in this section. There we go. And so, but like I said, there are several docs around the valley, so it might be worth looking into different offices, maybe getting a couple different price quotes, ask around. So thank you. I'm going to go back to this website in case anybody wants these resources up. And if there are any other questions, I would be happy to answer them. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming today and for sitting and listening. I know this was quick, but hopefully it covers all of the highlights that you guys needed. I know we have a comment here that some of these symptoms were going on before implants and still continuing. What I can say is, and you'll run into this a lot on the forums, that, you know, once people kind of lock on to this idea that my implants are causing problems, very often the implant becomes the only problem. And that's seldom the case, right? So, you know, when I took my implants out, I was able to decrease my thyroid medication, but not come off of it. I was able to decrease my pellet doses, but not come off of them, right? So there's probably still other things in the mix besides just the implants. If they have become different sizes, is that a sign of leakage? Quite possibly. You know, the other hard part is that our breast can change size for lots of reasons: weight gain or weight loss, sometimes hormone shifts. A lot of women notoriously gain breast volume when they hit menopause, but it could also possibly be leakage, yes. If you end up with one breast that's a dramatically different size than the other, I'd say that's a pretty slam dunk, probably a leak. So you'd want to get that checked out, and MRI is the best way to do that. And that's something your doctor can order for you. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. If anybody has questions or wants to talk to me personally, I'm more than happy to do this. I think of the millions of women out there who have implants and who are potentially suffering, and like, we need this information to spread. So I'm happy to talk to anybody at any point in time. I'm an open book. I'm willing to answer any questions about my journey, and thank you all so very much for coming.